I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, if you're healthy, you may not know it, but there's a crisis with ambulances in Multnomah County. If you need one, it's often a big problem. And by the way, try not to have a heart attack on a Tuesday morning. We'll explain why in a moment. The emergency enveloping emergency response. That is our big story tonight. Investigative reporter Evan Watson has spent a lot of time detailing the problems with getting an ambulance for your emergency. Tonight, his deepest look yet at the problem and why it's leading to burnout with ambulance workers. Evan Watson joins me now. Evan, what have you discovered?
Well, Pat, this is the story that just doesn't go away, right? And what we did here was through a records request, found information on level 0. That's when 0 ambulances are available to be dispatched out to emergency call, a product of an overstressed or understaffed system. In this level 0 data, we found that there were 15,000 calls, nearly 15,000 times, where dispatchers didn't have an available ambulance to send. Fire crews responded, but someone needing treatment in an ambulance or fast transport to the hospital, they were forced to wait. On average, it took 9.5 minutes for a dispatcher to just assign an ambulance in these cases, and then even longer for the ambulance to get to that emergency.
Wow, those are kind of shocking numbers. And then I'm sure you broke it down even more.
Yeah, through yet another records request, I wanted to look at the worst times to call for an ambulance in Multnomah County. And that's what we found out. 911 call data shows Friday is the worst day, and Friday and Saturday nights are the worst times to call for an ambulance. You can see that here in this heat map. There were more level 0 incidents on these weekend nights than any other time throughout the week. High call volume is a major factor, but it's not everything. These weekend evening level 0 calls include the death of Robert Ketchum, a Portland man who was crossing the street in a wheelchair when he was killed by a hit-and-run driver. He died at the scene waiting 32 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. Interestingly, the next worst time to call for an ambulance was Tuesday morning from 9 to 11. That 2-hour block produced more level 0 calls than any other time throughout the week. And it's not immediately clear why, but it shows it's not always better if your emergency just happens to happen on a non-weekend evening.
Wow, yeah. And with all those stats, I'm sure this is leading to a lot of the paramedics working just really long hours.
Yeah, they're picking up 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-hour shifts, and burnout is a really big problem.
Yeah.
As a paramedic in Multnomah County, Eli Killstrom prepares for anything.
In this job, you try your best to understand your capabilities. We can't unshoot somebody. We can't unsmoke a pack a day for 30 years, and I can't make there be more ambulances.
AMR, the county's ambulance provider, is severely understaffed. Response times are far below county standards and getting worse. It's a dangerous situation for anyone who needs emergency treatment and transport. Paramedics are picking up extra shifts in a tough job.
You could go from a shooting to a birth to it's too cold to live outside.
That means burnout is now a big problem.
There's not enough paramedics. Everybody is tired, but we're dealing with it the best we can.
What have you heard from other people who have either left the profession or the field or are considering leaving?
That they just can't do it anymore. That they're exhausted. They're not able to spend time with their family.
AMR knows this. Vice President Randy Lauer, a longtime paramedic turned boss, admits this is a different kind of pressure.
I couldn't imagine being a paramedic in the system now. Of course, they're a lot younger than I am, but I don't think I could handle the workload and the stress of this system the way it is now.
AMR is offering hiring incentives and scholarships to attract more paramedics, but it's not working. KGW acquired AMR staffing data from 2023. It shows paramedic turnover outpaced hiring. AMR brought in 32 paramedics last year. It lost 44.
I fear we're going to see more of this until something changes.
Why is that?
Just because the staffing is still going the wrong way, we're able to deploy fewer ambulances than we were 6 months ago. That's likely to continue for a while. We don't see it shifting. So I think I've said before, we're in crisis headed to catastrophe.
Paramedics like Killstrom are left to pick up the slack as shifts stretch to 14 hours or longer.
It's very easy to see why people would be looking for a different place to work.
Meanwhile, Killstrom recognizes that people all over Multnomah County are waiting for an ambulance to arrive in their most critical moments. something he feels sorry for, even if he can't change it.
There are a lot of things that are outside of our control, including how many calls there are and the severity of those calls. We are doing our best. We very, very much appreciate your patience, and we're very sorry that we aren't able to serve you in a more timely manner.
Multnomah County EMS Director Dr. John Jew told Commissioner Sharon Myron that a system-wide review is warranted. But the county won't budge on its requirement that ambulances be staffed by 2 highly trained paramedics. AMR blames that strict requirement for its staffing struggles. The company did manage to add EMTs in Multnomah County last year. EMTs have less training than paramedics, but that means they aren't allowed to respond to life-threatening emergencies in the county. The shortage of paramedics means dispatchers answer more than 1,000 911 calls every month where they don't have an available ambulance to send.
We are just as frustrated as you are in terms of the challenges that we are facing that we do not currently have the tools to solve.
So, Evan, who are the players? Who's for this and who's against it?
Right. With that 2 paramedic requirement, you have Multnomah County saying that produces the best healthcare results. You also, interestingly, have the union that represents the paramedics in the county saying that they want to keep the 2 paramedic requirement. It's best for the paramedics they represent. On the other side of things, you have AMR saying the only way to solve this problem is to go to a 1 paramedic, 1 EMT model. You also have Portland Fire coming out recently, the chief saying that it's egregious that we haven't gone to this model yet. And then a commissioner and all the other people that we see in our comments and emails and calls saying, hey, we need to do something. I want an ambulance there, even if it's staffed slightly differently, rather than waiting and nothing coming.
Yeah, because we've seen it's not getting better.
Right.
Thanks, Evan. Great stuff. And by the way, we went through a lot of those numbers really quick. If you want to take your time, Evan has 2 terrific stories that he's written on this and published on kgw.com. You can go check them out as soon as the show's over. In the meantime, what are you thinking about after seeing Evan's report? Any solutions come to mind when thinking about this ambulance crisis? Send them our way. We'd love to hear from you. The email is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. The 35-day session of Oregon's legislature starts this coming Monday, and so legislative leaders met with reporters in Salem today to talk about some of the big things that they're working on. Tonight, we're going to hear from Governor Tina Kotek. Tomorrow night, legislative leaders. The governor took several questions about this marquee issue. This session, it is the changes to Measure 110. That's the Oregon law that decriminalized drugs. Democratic lawmakers are working on a plan that would end that and recriminalize drugs, but make it a Class C misdemeanor. That's the lowest level. Republicans want that to be a Class A misdemeanor, the highest level, before getting into felony territory. Governor Kotek sounded encouraged by the direction lawmakers are moving, but refused to commit herself to signing a bill.
And I think they're moving in the right direction. I'm going to say that up front. And as I mentioned yesterday, things change. As a legislature, they start at one place. There is a lot of work yet to do. My staff is tracking and reviewing the different changes. And I also want to say, in what we're hearing from the Joint Committee, I know there's a lot of focus on the recriminalization, but I would hope everybody looks at this as a comprehensive package. It is about what you do on the front end, as it relates, for example, to the misdemeanor, but it's also about connecting people with services, making sure we're planning better, making sure we're making investments. What I'm focusing on right now, as I continue to follow what is going on in that committee and their proposal, we're focusing on what the capacity needs are for treatment. Because I believe the legislature is going to recommend changes that will be incumbent upon us to make sure there are more opportunities for recovery. And so my job right now is to make sure, where are we under the Oregon Health Authority's leadership? What resources are available? What more resources do we need? Where do we need placement of services? That is what I'm focused on right now, so that I can walk alongside that proposal from the Joint Committee, so we make the right choices by the end of session. So again, it's a complex proposal, and I'm watching it evolve, and we'll see where it ends up.
But I'm hearing you say you envision yourself potentially signing a bill that includes recriminalization. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I want to see a proposal that answers a set of questions, and one piece will be recriminalization. But if we just look at recriminalization in isolation, I think it's missing the point. So my question is going to be, like, if you make a change, legislature, and you're suggesting a change, what else are you going to do different to make sure we have better outcomes? So to me, it's an interrelated conversation.
Seemed to me like the governor took a big old detour on the way to answering that first question, so I'm really glad that reporter had a follow-up. But she still kind of dodged the question of whether she'd sign a bill that recriminalizes drugs, so another reporter asked that question again.
Again, to the other question, I want to make sure that all parts of the bill make sense and we're actually going to have outcomes. The issue of addiction and the need for pathways to recovery should not be a political football. We should understand any changes that we're making and that it will improve the lives of Oregonians. And that's the filter I'm going to bring to the bill. And I think that's what legislators are trying to do. They are hearing a lot of perspectives. We know there's a ballot measure out there that people are talking about. Let's do this right. Let's make sure we're going to help people with whatever changes come. And that's the filter I'm going to bring to whether or not I can sign the bill.
Okay, Governor, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Measure 110 has been a political football since before it passed. So we probably should not pretend on that front. Sure, there are lots of earnest people on both sides, but politics is in and around the entire issue. The governor also said she's introducing just one bill this short session, and it involves housing. And she wants $500 million for a variety of housing projects that she wants lawmakers to approve changes that would allow cities to move their urban growth boundaries under certain conditions. A reporter asked the governor if she had the votes to pass that bill.
The bill is introduced is a product of a lot of hard work, right? So I think it's a very good starting place, but no bill is perfect on day one. I am relying on the Senate, Senator Jama, the Senate President, to make sure that if there are any additional changes, that it can get across the finish line. I fully expect some technical changes in the bill as introduced. I assume we will continue to have some negotiated conversation about further refinement of the UGB tool, and I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the idea that we would not pass a substantial bill this session for housing development. And I've been very clear with our legislative leaders, we need to get it done.
So, no, she doesn't have the votes yet, but it better happen. That's my interpretation of the answer anyway. Again, we'll hear from legislative leaders in the House and Senate on Friday night's show. And while we're talking about priorities for the upcoming session, here's a priority for you. We'd love for you to tune in to the story on Monday night. We're taking the show on the road. We're dedicating our entire half hour to the start of Oregon's short legislative session, from extended one-on-one interviews to a tour showing how you can get involved, even a bit of history mixed in. Ever wonder, for example, who that gold guy statue is meant to represent? Well, we now know, and we'll explain that and a whole lot more to you Monday night on The Story at 6:30. In the meantime, coming up after the break, you had plenty to say about our big story last night, featuring a young homeless woman in Portland addicted to fentanyl. Her mom tries to help her with food and laundry, and many of you say she was just enabling her daughter's lifestyle. We'll share more of your thoughts, including some heartbreaking stories from other families who have loved ones living on the streets of Portland, when The Story returns. Now let's get to some of your comments on our big story last night from Blair Best. She introduced us to a homeless woman named Jade here who lives in Portland and is addicted to fentanyl. Blair showed us a day in the life of Jade, which revolves around the deadly drug. Jade's mom helps her by bringing food and doing laundry. She told Blair that she cannot pretend her daughter does not exist. She has to try to help her. Jade has made it clear she does not want to stop using fentanyl. It was a tough story on so many levels, and if you missed it, you should check it out on the KGW YouTube channel. We asked you to share your stories if you've experienced something similar. Here's a voicemail from a viewer named Rebecca.
I am the mother of a daughter who was addicted to drugs and alcohol. We tried many times to help her, get her into treatment, and it was a vicious cycle. And the only thing that I can think of that would work would be to put them into a situation where they cannot get out until they have spent years retraining their brain how to function in society. My daughter passed away at 34 years old. Drug addiction is a problem, and we are not attacking it in the way that it should be attacked. It is a brain issue, and they do not come, most of them don't come to the point of turning their lives around. They end up in the ground.
How about that? Ann wrote to us, my daughter, once a state gymnastics champion, is now homeless on the streets of Portland at the age of 23. We have no family history of addiction. She fell into her addiction directly related to the friend group she fell into at Westview High School that introduced her to Xanax. She went on, our daughter has done 4 rounds of detox recovery, but the pull of the drug, fentanyl and meth, remains too strong. We've learned that until she wants to get help, there's nothing we can do. But the drugs have rewired her brain so much that I worry that won't ever happen, and the result will be death. Thanks for sharing those heartbreaking stories. Other viewers like Will saw Jade's story and quickly pointed out what he sees as a failure in Oregon law.
People might characterize this as callous, but that's Measure 110. Jade's story is Measure 110. And as someone who voted for Measure 110, I'm so opposed to Measure 110 now, and I want it to be repealed or completely reworked so that drugs are criminalized again.
I, as a viewer of this story, can't help but wonder what would the reactions of the people who created Measure 110, what would their reactions be to Jade's story? I would love to have them sit and watch this and hear what their thoughts are on Jade's struggle and how protecting her autonomy and ensuring that there are no penalties for her use or any sort of forced, strongly encouraged route to sobriety, that you're just letting people like her suffer in their addiction until they inevitably die.
And DJ said, Jade's story is an example of why 110 needs to be repealed, writing, here's how to help save those lost souls presently chained to the cartel's drugs, make life on the streets harder, access to drugs harder, charges for possession and use, consequences to shoplifting real. If rock bottom with fentanyl is, as the doctor stated, death, then treatment must be begun before waiting for addicts to hit bottom. Treatment with court-ordered diversion. Jade's story also brought up the dilemma of her mom. Many of you wrote to us that the mom needs to just cut Jade off and stop enabling her to live the way that she's living.
I don't want this woman to die. I don't think any of us do. But as long as mom keeps bringing dinner and the boyfriend keeps picking up the drugs, where's her motivation? There isn't any. There's got to be a better answer than rock bottom is death, so we just keep this going on. There's just got to be a better answer.
That question of what should Jade's mom do caught the attention of someone that we have heard from here before on the show. Martin Camacho is the director of admissions at Cielo Treatment Center in Portland, which specializes in addiction treatment for young adults. He wrote in to us today with some key points from his perspective on what Jade's mom actually should do. First, find support for herself, not for Jade, for mom, whether through friends, family, or a support group. Next, educate yourself about your loved one's drug of choice to better understand the addiction. Communicate openly. Create a safe and non-judgmental space to talk about struggles. Next, avoid enabling behavior like providing money that can be used for drugs, covering up for their actions, or making excuses for them. Encourage professional help from a counselor, therapist, or addiction specialist. Help them find treatment and take them if they cannot get there themselves. Set boundaries, define acceptable behavior and consequences, and then stick to those. Support treatment plans. If a loved one decides to get help, be involved. And finally, be patient. Recovery is challenging and ongoing. Thanks for everyone for your input. The addiction crisis is a topic that we're going to stay on top of for weeks and months to come. Up next on the story, yesterday's big announcement was a fentanyl emergency in downtown Portland, but some surrounding neighborhoods have said, hey, what about us? Blair Best tells us what Multnomah County commissioners have on the table tomorrow when it comes to the drug crisis. That's coming up when the story returns. This week, a fentanyl state of emergency was declared in downtown Portland, but surrounding communities are also struggling with the deadly drug crisis, and they believe that that emergency order should reach beyond just the central city. Here's our Blair Best.
There's a deadly grip tightening around many Oregonians.
Yeah, I OD'd, almost died.
James has stayed in homeless shelters in Albany, Corvallis, and now Beaverton. Fentanyl was always at his fingertips, whether he wanted it or not.
Unbeknownst to me, I'd gotten some coke, and it was mainly fentanyl.
People are dying every day from it.
This week, the governor, along with Portland's mayor and the Multnomah County chair, declared a 90-day fentanyl emergency focused in Portland's central city.
The fentanyl crisis on our streets has destroyed too many lives.
Under the emergency order will be a new data command center based out of downtown Portland and a focus on prevention and police response there. Many argue that should be happening beyond just the central city.
I think it should be the whole state.
I think maybe the governor doesn't have a firm grasp on how wide that crisis has spread.
Sarah Toner lives in Beaverton. She says drug use happens near her child's elementary school.
It is affecting all of us, and there's spread from Portland. If Portland doesn't have the services, these people are going to come into all of the other bedroom communities.
Multnomah County Commissioner Julia Brim Edwards agrees.
If you go to any neighborhood, whether it's near a school, inside the bathroom at a public library, at a bus shelter, all over the city, you will see that fentanyl has a grip on our neighborhoods.
Yet the governor believes targeting Portland will impact the rest of the state.
Focusing the emergency response in Portland will benefit the entire region, state, and tribal lands, because we know that a large share of fentanyl in Oregon is trafficked through our major city.
Now, we should mention that the central city, while it's primarily downtown, it also includes parts of Powell Boulevard and the South Waterfront. But this morning, Multnomah County commissioners got a resolution from the chair to make this emergency order county-wide, and they're going to vote on that tomorrow. But that still leaves many cities and counties to deal with this deadly crisis seemingly on their own. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Tough problem that continues to befuddle a lot of us. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.